Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to discuss something very important. We normally say that feedback is the food for champions, and we are going to have a serious presenter who is going to tell us how we should give. You know, some of us like giving, but not receiving. How do you receive? How do you give feedback? This is important. It is part of communication. You cannot call yourself a communicator without knowing how to give and receive feedback. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard J. Magoma. I'm going to be holding brief for the moderator of choice, Grace Nzula. And we are very happy to inform you about the performance management webinar that is going to be on the 16th, and it's going to be done by Jacinta. Tell us the name of the famous lawyer who is going to undertake this discussion, and it's going to be lovely. I know she does an amazing job. Remind me her name now that you have not.
Babu.
Ann Babu. Ann Babu.
Ann Babu on Thursday from 2 p.m.
On 2 p.m. What is the cost?
It's only 3,000 Kenya shillings.
Only 3,000. How many CBD points?
For the IHRM members, they will be earning 1 CPD point.
The moment you get in, you have bagged 1 CBD point and you will be remaining with 9, whichever numbers you have accumulated. Then another sponsor of this particular program is K2 HR. That is an organization that is in Rwanda. It is a HR consultancy firm that is in Rwanda. If you're in Rwanda and you're undertaking HR work, HR Squared are your people to talk to in Rwanda. Then we have a very good friend who has been with this program for one of the longest times. That is Herbert Zake. That is Steadfast Solutions, sorry. Herbert Zake is known to find your strengths, Gallup strengths. He has really mentored, he has really coached people to come out in terms of their competencies so that you can be able to excel in your work. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now invite, yes, that is our discussion on the 16th, legal intrigues, common pitfalls in performance management. It is 3,000 only. You will get a CBD point, and it will be presented none other than Ann Babu. She's the advocate of the High Court. IHR members will get 1 CBD point. Yes. Thank you very much. Jacinta, now we can remove the adverts. Thank you so much for having time to come and listen to our presenter tonight. Shanice, it is your turn to shine. Tell us how we should give feedback and how we should receive feedback, because it is a two-way traffic. Welcome on board. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Shanice.
Thank you so much, Richard and Jacinta, and thank you all for allowing me to share this important framework that has proven to foster and transform relationships in the workplace. Give me one moment while I share my screen.
We can see your slide now.
Perfect.
Very good.
Okay, so what are we doing today? Today, we are unpacking the why and the how of feedback. We are going to take some time to reflect on where we are right now, how we think about feedback, how we experience it, and how it currently shows up in the workplace and our leadership. From there, we will walk through how to ask for feedback, how to give it well, how to receive it without shutting down, and how to process it in a way that actually supports growth. I hope today feels practical, honest, and grounding. And I also want to name that this is just a slice, a shortened version of a fuller training. So think of today as both an introduction and an invitation to go deeper. Okay, so first things first, let me introduce myself. Who am I? I am a disciple of Jesus. My faith really guides my work. I'm a radical people-focused executive. I've been in HR since 2007, coaching since 2018, and my order of priorities are people first and the institution second. I'm a slow traveler. I love spending time in other countries. I've lived in 4 countries and I've visited 22 countries to date. I consider myself a deep thinker, so I'm not fast with the draw. And I realize that in order to be my best self, I need processing time and silence. I own 2 companies, NJE Consulting, where we support people and organizations in growing with purpose and integrity, and a clothing brand. I am also the ED of my family's foundation, and I'm a boy mom. I have an adult son and a teenager. And I fell in love with Kenya in 2020. I've been visiting for about 15 years. I have family members that are Kenyan, and it really is the wildlife, the flowers, and the green spaces that keeps me here. I really did enjoy putting together this Who I Am slide, and I encourage you to do so. I feel like so often we place our self-identity and value in our jobs and in our titles, and we are so much more than that. Okay, so let's get into it. How does feedback impact people and organizations? When we talk about feedback, we are not talking about a soft skill on the side. We are talking about something that affects people, culture, and business results. It matters because the work environment impacts mental health in real ways. I believe the COVID-19 pandemic made this very apparent for us. So let's get into a little bit of data to frame our discussion. The World Health Organization estimated that 15% of working adults were living with a mental disorder in 2019. Today, it has overtaken cancer, and it is the most cited health concern in the world. Depression and anxiety cost 12 billion working days every year. 69% of employees say their manager affects their mental health, and it's the same impact as a spouse or a partner. So the way that we interact and speak with people at work carries real weight. We all know that feedback is essential for professional and emotional development and intelligence. Research shows us that feedback is one of the most powerful, influential tools in learning and achievement. But it also reminds us that delivery matters. Feedback that is clear, specific, and grounded in behavior helps people grow in skill and confidence and self-awareness. Feedback that is vague, personal, or threatening can do the opposite. So this is just a slide that shows us the impact of feedback on organizations, and it connects directly to organizational performance. Gallup found that highly engaged teams have 23% higher profitability, 18% higher sales, and 78% lower absenteeism. So when feedback is done well, it doesn't just strengthen relationships, it strengthens the organization. I can actually think about 2 bosses that I've had in my career that have given me timely and constructive feedback. And I was so incredibly grateful for that. And when I look at my career, I noticed that I really excelled at those organizations and I felt seen and heard. How do you want to be remembered?
Excuse me,
To people?
Shanice. I don't know what we are going to do so that we can see you well. I don't know if your seat is a bit lower or something.
You said my seat is lower?
Now that is a little bit better. Better.
Okay.
Okay, that is okay. All right.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so now that we've been reminded of the impact, let's pivot to explore what it is, practical strategies for implementation, and we can also see how these insights transform into action. Okay, so feedback. Feedback is everywhere. It is direct and indirect. It is intentional and unintentional. And at times we want it, and at times we do not. When we were in school, we got verbal feedback from our teachers and our parents. And growing up, we got feedback from our friends. And at times, it may not have been kind. And we may not have understood how to process it. As adults in the workplace, we get feedback in all forms. But how good are we at asking for it, processing it, and giving it? I truly believe that one of the major problems with today's workforce is conflict avoidance, people pleasing, and passive aggressiveness, which leads to a lack of trust and ultimately a toxic workplace. Learning how to manage conflict and communication can solve many problems early on. We have all heard this saying in the workplace that it is not personal. But is that true? Today, I hope we can learn a few tactics on how we can be prepared to receive feedback, how we can give it in a way that can be processed, and how, when we have it, what we actually do with it. And we know that feedback is a gift, and I hope that we can treat it as such. Okay, so this is a framework that I learned many years ago, and I'm going to go through the steps very briefly, and then we will watch a video that will further help us to dissect this framework. So brain-friendly feedback has about 4 steps. We know that sometimes we can shut down when there are harsh words that are used. There are things that are said that may attack our character. And so in order to give feedback in a brain-friendly way, you would start with a micro yes question. And it acts as a pacing tool, letting people know that feedback is coming. It can create a moment of buy-in. And so an example of this micro yes is, do you have a few minutes? I would like to share some ideas about the project. So you see how I asked a question, I let someone know that feedback is actually coming. Step 2, you can give a data point, and this data point should be very specific. You say what you heard or you saw. Being open-minded is really important, and you should use objective words and use I statements. For example, instead of saying, I don't think you like my work, you can say, I noticed the last 2 reports that were returned had significant changes to the process. Could we go over your expectations for the project so that I can align with your results, with your requirements, let me say. Notice the data point and the question. Okay, so step 3, how did the data point impact you or others? As humans, we like logic. At this point, this logic helps our brains to connect the pieces. and it gives a sense of purpose and meaning. Step 4, which is the last step, ask a question. This creates a joint commitment and not necessarily compliance. So now we're going to watch a video that will further describe this framework, and then we will debrief. Jacinta, can you share your screen and put on the video link that I sent you?
All right, let me do that just in a few seconds.
Thank you.
If you look at like a carpenter, they have a toolbox. A dentist, they have their drills. In our era and the type of work most of us are doing, the tool we most need is actually centered around being able to give and receive feedback well. Humans have been talking about feedback for centuries. In fact, Confucius, way back in 500 BC, talked about how important it is to be able to say difficult messages well. But to be honest, we're still pretty bad at it. In fact, a recent Gallup survey found that only 26% of employees strongly agree that the feedback they get actually improves their work. Those numbers are pretty dismal. So what's going on? The way that most people give their feedback actually isn't brain friendly. People fall into one of two camps. Either they're of the camp that is very indirect and soft, and their brain doesn't even recognize that feedback is being given, or it's just simply confused. Or they fall into the other camp of being too direct. And with that, it tips the other person into the land of being defensive. There's this part of the brain called the amygdala, and it's scanning at all times to figure out whether the message has a social threat attached to it. With that, we'll move forward in defensiveness, we'll move backwards in retreat. And what happens is the feedback giver then starts to dysregulate as well. They add more ums and ahs and justifications, and the whole thing gets wonky really fast. It doesn't have to be this way. I and my team have spent many years going into different companies and asking, who here is a great feedback giver? Anybody who's named again and again, we actually bring into our labs to see what they're doing differently. What we find is that there's a 4-part formula that you can use to say any difficult message well. Okay, are you ready for it? Here we go. The first part of the formula is what we call the micro yes. Great feedback givers begin their feedback by asking a question that is short but important. It lets the brain know that feedback is actually coming. It would be something, for example, like, do you have 5 minutes to talk about how that last conversation went? Or I have some ideas for how we can improve things. Can I share them with you? This micro yes question does 2 things for you. First of all, it's going to be a pacing tool. It lets the other person know that feedback is about to be given. And the second thing it does is it creates a moment of buy-in. I can say yes or no to that yes or no question. And with that, I get a feeling of autonomy. The second part of the feedback formula is going to be giving your data point. Here you should name specifically what you saw or heard and cut out any words that aren't objective. There's a concept we call blur words. A blur word is something that can mean different things to different people. Blur words are things that are not specific. So for example, if I say, you shouldn't be so defensive, or you could be more proactive. What we see great feedback givers doing differently is they'll convert their blur words into actual data points. So for example, instead of saying, you know, you are reliable, we would say, you said you'd get that email to me by 11, and I still don't have it yet. Specificity is also important when it comes to positive feedback. And the reason for that is that we want to be able to specify exactly what we want the other person to increase or diminish. And if we stick with blur words, they actually won't have any clue particularly what to do going forward to keep repeating that behavior. The third part of the feedback formula is the impact statement. Here you name exactly how that data point impacted you. So for example, I might say, because I didn't get the message, I was blocked on my work and couldn't move forward. Or I really liked how you added those stories because it helped me grasp the concepts faster. It gives you a sense of purpose and meaning and logic between the points, which is something the brain really craves. The fourth part of the feedback formula is a question. Great feedback givers wrap their feedback message with a question. They'll ask something like, well, how do you see it? Or, this is what I'm thinking we should do. But what are your thoughts on it? What it does is it creates commitment rather than just compliance. It makes the conversation no longer be a monologue, but rather becomes a joint problem-solving situation. But there's one last thing. Great feedback givers not only can say messages well, but also they ask for feedback regularly. In fact, our research on perceived leadership shows that you shouldn't wait for feedback to be given to you, we call push feedback, but rather you should actively ask for feedback, what we call pulling feedback. Pulling feedback establishes you as a continual learner and puts the power in your hand. The most challenging situations are actually the ones that call for the most skillful feedback, but it doesn't have to be hard. Now that you know this 4-part formula, you can mix and match it to make it work for any difficult conversation.
Thank you. So what we are going to do, I would love to get an idea of where you all are when it comes to this framework. So we're going to take a poll. You can scan this QR code, or you can go to menti.com and put in these numbers to participate in the poll. And we will check to see where folks are. So I'll give folks about maybe 3 to 4 minutes to do that. If you're having difficulty with pulling up this QR code or the website, please go ahead and put that in the chat, and then we will drop the question into the box.
Janice, maybe you can keep the QR code on the screen for people who are still scanning.
Yes, I will. Give me one moment, please.
All right.
Does everyone see the QR code?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. So I see a few responses coming in. Feedback must be specific. The micro, yes, and the last one didn't get the name. Yes, so 2 questions. Asking questions is important. Impact. Feedback works best when it starts with a question. That's correct. The yes factor is definitely an invitation to participate instead of it being a monologue. And it creates buy-in as well. Yes. Being very specific is much, much better. And also I'll add that feedback is it's an observation, right? You're observing something. You don't know the full story or the full truth. And so it is an observation until you get information from that individual. Getting the other person's view or opinion makes it suggestive and not a command. Yes. Great observations from the training. Preparing the recipient. Yes. At times we can be a bit defensive, and so preparing them with that initial question helps out a lot. Feedback is continuous, yes. Okay. So maybe maybe a few more moments on this, or 1 minute left. We have about 27 people that have put their responses in. Going direct to the point. Mhm.
Let's participate. Let us participate. Let us participate. All of us. At least we need 100.
What a wonderful goal, Richard.
Yeah. The people who are participating in feedback, in a feedback webinar should also give feedback about the feedback we are learning.
Yes. Preparing for change. That's an excellent reflection. Yes. We all know that change will continue at all times. Nothing ever stays the same. Yes, the use of data is so important. Yes. Mhm. Okay. Thank you all for participating in this Mentimeter. And so we will move on to receiving feedback. Give me one moment so that I can switch my screen. Okay, so now we're moving on to receiving the feedback, which I don't know how many individuals here are in leadership, but it is important for us in leadership to receive the feedback, right? And so what I will say is that it is so important to understand that you control how you receive the feedback and how you perceive it. You take what is applicable and you leave the rest. You analyze the feedback for any valuable insights. And at times, I know that we may not be as self-aware as we think. And so I think it really is important to consider asking a person that you trust and that is skilled in self-awareness to help you analyze the feedback. You can also consider the motivation and the intent of the feedback. Is it accurate? And what your trust level is with the person that's giving it. Understand that feedback is a role in professional development no matter what level you are in. It is not a measurement of self-worth. So, one of a really important thing to do is asking for feedback. In other words, is pull feedback. When you ask for feedback, you're being proactive instead of waiting for someone to give it to you. It helps to build your self-awareness. And we know that building the muscle of emotional intelligence is a key factor in developing better relationships and career growth. I recommend that you set regular cycles to ask for feedback, whether that be weekly, monthly, or quarterly. And you should utilize and incorporate feedback cycles into meeting agendas, organizational, departmental goals. And then at the end of this presentation, I have a form. It's called a 2x2 form that I've used with the people that report to me. And also setting reminders is very, very important. So you should definitely have some sort of monthly cadence of a feedback cycle. And once you get that feedback, what do you do with it? Internalize it wisely. We know that 20% is heard and 80% is self-response. So you hear everything, but you agree selectively. So you use that strainer approach. What I will say is that sometimes when you get feedback and you're responding to it, your amygdala, the fight or flight response, has to chill out long enough for you to actually hear what the other person is saying, not just what you think they are saying. When people do not take the time to calm their brains and manage their feelings, they cannot engage in active listening. You're listening to all the feedback, but you're, again, agreeing very selectively. And as it's being given, you don't necessarily have to agree. As I mentioned, I am someone that is a deep thinker. And so when I have a conversation with someone, I actually have to process that conversation. And maybe a few days later, especially if it was something that was that had maybe a great deal of conflict or something that was a high stakes conversation, right? So I need processing time. And so if you are leaders and you have people that report to you, it's important to understand how they process as well. So with this strainer approach, you retain what matters and discard what does not matter. Remember, feedback is an observation. When someone is giving it to you, it is an observation. You now turn it into fact by agreeing to certain things, or things that are not true, you discard those things. But at all times, no matter how the feedback is given, it's important for you to choose growth. Okay, so on to, this is still kind of processing the feedback. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into how you can grow from feedback. It's almost like you're a chef in the kitchen. You decide what ingredients to put into your dish. You decide what ingredients to put into your mind about the feedback that was given to you. Be reflective on the relevance and how it actually applies to you. And sometimes this can take some time, but think back. Take the feedback and put what is applicable into action and discard whatever does not apply. But remember, always choose growth. So as we close, I want to leave you with this. Feedback is not just a tool for performance. It is a tool for clarity, connection, and growth. And when we make feedback timely, specific, and rooted in observation rather than judgment, we can create a space for people to learn, adjust, and thrive. And that matters the most. Strong organizations are built when people feel seen, supported, and are clear about what is needed. My hope is that you leave here not feeling pressure to do this perfectly, but feeling more equipped to do it intentionally. So let us move forward at being great at giving, asking, and processing feedback in a way that transforms ourselves and others. I also want to name again that today we covered just a slice, a shortened version of a fuller training where participants get to practice in groups and reflect. And so I hope this gave you something practical to reflect upon and also something to build upon. This slide has a few resources, which I will drop in the chat. And there is a tool that I created that helps build upon leadership skills that God has already given you. And I want to thank All Trans Solutions and the Human Resources Management Institute for hosting me and creating space for this conversation. I am truly grateful. If you'd like to keep in touch, here are some of my profiles: LinkedIn profile, my consulting page. So feel free to scan these QR codes. I'll leave that up for a moment, and then I will drop links to the tools in the chat as well. Thank you so much. I'll hand it over to you, Richard.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know what we are supposed to be doing, and I can see some people are providing feedback. They have enjoyed, they have loved. Let us see as many as possible. I can see Shelly Nabalayo. You've raised up your hand. We'll give you time. Jacinta, you will unmute her. You will see somebody who has raised her hand up, I think. Monica Odindo said this program has been informative. Let us keep sharing those appreciations, those feedbacks. Evelyn Nasuna, you're saying, thank you, George Nagoya. You have clapped that Shanice has done a commendable job. Now it is the turn. Mohammed, thank you very much. Wamboi Wangare, thank you very much. Now it's the time for questions. As we prepare to ask questions, Shanice, we normally say that communication is the glue that keeps operations together.
Mhm.
Yet one of the most important components of communication is feedback. But then again, it is absolutely neglected. Organizations do not invest. Why do you think organizations or individuals or professionals, we do not take much investment in feedback? And as you've rightly said, that always lie on the side of growth. So if we neglect feedback, then we are not growing. Why do you think we don't invest so much in feedback?
One thing that I have experienced, especially when an organization is going through budget cuts, they tend to cut learning and development first. And so when you cut learning and development, you are cutting out the ability for people to actually have coursework or mentorship in the workplace. And so you're left with people that may have excelled as an individual contributor, moving into a management position without sufficient training. And so, as we know in leadership, it's so important to be one, self-aware, and two, treat people as you would like to be treated, right? We know with Gen Z, they are not accepting this a kind of hierarchy type of organizational structure, right? They want to be heard, they want to be seen. And so I think that is one of the main reasons why people don't necessarily invest in feedback, due to the fact that sometimes professional development budgets are cut. But it's something that people can learn on their own by practicing. This is not something, this was introduced to me many, many years ago. And so I just started to practice with the people that report to me. And of course, it wasn't always perfect, but I noticed that I've reported to the president of an organization, and I noticed that he used the technique with me one time. And so I started to laugh when he did it. And so, but it was very helpful in our conversation. And it does what it really does work. And I really do encourage people to practice the technique.
Thank you. That is quite a good response. The other question I could like to ask as we wait for the rest to formulate their questions is, the amygdala is a trigger happy, if you may, component part of the brain, and it's always ready to shoot. How can we manage to suit it, to calm it down so that it doesn't see any feedback that is not palatable as something that we have got to be defensive about? Like in anger management, we say count 1, 2, 3. Are there tricks or techniques that we can use to calm down the amygdala?
Yes, I recently learned a trick, and it's called box breathing. And so, you breathe in 4, you hold it, and then you breathe out maybe up to 7. And so that definitely calms your nervous system down completely. And so I think it's really, really important to figure out what works for you, right? So you mentioned counting, I mentioned box breathing. Another strategy could be when someone is actually giving you the feedback, you do not have to respond immediately. You can ask that person to give you some time to reflect. And, if a manager should have a deep understanding of, each of their employees and their personalities. There are people that, will respond inauthentically, right? There are people that will, as you mentioned, maybe respond in anger. And then there will be people that say, please give me some time to reflect on what you're saying, and I will get back to you within whatever amount of time.
Thank you, Shanish. I can see Paul Ngugi. Paul Ngugi is the CEO of St. John Ambulance. Is asking, how do you effectively give feedback to someone who is defensive and resistant to receiving it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. You may want to consider sending some of those techniques to that person. And you can actually call it out. You can say to that person, I notice that you are being defensive and that you are unwilling to receive this particular feedback. And this is not the goal. The goal is for us to be in alignment. And so you can encourage them to do whatever they need to do to be, calm down and to be able to receive the feedback. I wouldn't use the word calm down, because I notice when you say calm down, people, they do the opposite. But you can empower them by giving them a few tools or asking them, we all use ChatGPT and Claude, putting that in Claude and really working on that. And also you can mention to them that, it's important for all of us to be humble in the workplace and to know that we have this particular goal. We have particular goals that we would like to meet. And so if someone is not meeting these particular goals, it is the manager's responsibility to point that out to them and expressing that you actually care about their tenure at the organization. If your organization has values that incorporate, humility, some organizations have all different types of values. It may be humility, it may be many different things. You can quote those values to that person and let them know, and hopefully they will see that they are out of alignment, and that is something that they need to work on for their professional development. You can also invest in them to be able to have some sort of training in, receiving feedback or how to be a team player or whatever the challenge is.
Thank you. There is a question here, and it's quite interesting. It is by Annette Briner. She's asking, it is very easy for the IAPs to give feedback, but what about when feedback comes from the bottom up? Why does it become a problem?
It may become a problem when it is not modeled well by leadership. And so this is something that you have to practice. Your employees need to see that you are open to feedback. Your employees need to see that you have a sense of humility, and that despite your position, you are still learning as well. Right? There's so much for us to learn from Gen Z, from the younger organizations. There's so much for us to learn from our elders. And I think that having that humility would help with that, and modeling it first as a leader.
I love what you've mentioned, that intellectual humility is important, because there's something we call the curse of knowledge, whereby when you have the knowledge, you assume everybody knows about it, and then this blocks feedback. Now, the question I want to ask is this. I hope it doesn't disappear. The other day, I was giving a masterclass on leadership. And when I was researching, consistently what came out is the concept that you cannot lead people if you've not done self-awareness. And I'm glad that you've mentioned that self-awareness is important for feedback. Can you elaborate on that? How do I build my self-awareness? Are there tests?
Yeah, there are definitely tests. I'm trying to remember. I think the DISC is one of them. There's a strength-based test as well. The names are escaping me. I've taken several of them. One tried and true way that you can build your self-awareness is by practicing receiving feedback from people, having a coach And I know that at times people may not, organizations may not be able to afford that. What are some other ways to build emotional IQ? Those are the two that come to mind. Again, you can use ChatGPT or Claude to actually ask what are some of the tools that you can use. You can do some assessments on what your values are and figuring out how you can incorporate those values into your day-to-day practice. So for example, I mentioned, well, it was on my slide. I didn't actually talk about it. Some of my values are continuous learning and unlearning. When I think about my involvement in human resources since 2007 and who I am today, I am a totally different person. I used to think that human resources was a hammer, and I behaved as such. And so now I believe in people first at all times. I am trying to get to the root of issues and challenges. I am helping managers be better managers, because what I find is that most times when there's an issue, it is a management issue. It's not necessarily due to the staff, right? And so I have evolved. And so one of my values, which I identified maybe about 5 or 6 years, is continuous learning and unlearning. And also having humility to be and learning all of the different uh, things that come out about human behavior and how people behave in groups is important.
I love, you reminded me a quote, and I'm sure you are aware of it, that the illiterate of the 21st century are not necessarily those who cannot be able to read and write, those who cannot be able to unlearn and relearn. There is Joy, who said that you've truly empowered her by the knowledge you've shared. And there is Rhoda. Rhoda is asking about manipulative. Somebody's giving you feedback, but in your mind, probably you are saying this is not accurate, this is manipulative. How do you handle that?
Yeah, well, it really depends on your personality. You may want to address it immediately, or you may want to take some time to think about it. You can ask the person for specific examples of that. And you can also go and speak to your colleagues to ask them if they have observed the same type of behavior from you or not. And once you have collected that information and that data, and also have a period of self-reflection, after you've collected that information and data, you can address the individual or not. You can just have it be a self-reflective moment, or you can spend some time with that individual to acknowledge that you heard them, but you don't necessarily accept what was said. I hope I answered your question.
Fantastic. There is Dorothy Moindi. Dorothy Moindi wants to ask, or she has asked, in a situation whereby you know that people don't receive feedback as if they have taken Fanta or some sweet drink. They find it unpalatable, but nevertheless, you have got to give it. For example, you have got to give feedback on performance management. It may not be sweet to everybody. How do you do this?
Yes. So I think at times, and you all will know from the organizations that you work with, sometimes feedback comes maybe once or twice a year, and that is the worst thing that you can do. I believe that you should be giving feedback weekly or at a minimum monthly. And as I mentioned, putting it in your cadence. With my team, we have weekly meetings, and on a monthly basis, we do 2-by-2 feedback, meaning in that same session, we fill out a form before we meet, and that form comes 24 hours before the meeting. I will drop a link to that form in the chat, and it asks, what is it that I have done well over the whatever period? And what is it that I could improve on during that period? And so we all know that that form comes 24 hours before the meeting so that the person can reflect on that particular feedback and they can digest it, right? So that's the case of a written feedback. In terms of the process that I explained, you would, of course, ask a buy-in question. Is it possible that we can have maybe about 30 minutes to talk about what happened in the meeting? And so you're helping the person reflect back to the meeting and their behavior and to prepare for that feedback session.
Thank you. I can see Paul is asking, in most cases, people in leadership positions face the danger of whereby the employees know that this is what this gentleman or lady wants to hear, and they give it. So it tends to, this leader tends to be fixated by what they want to hear. What are the consequences of every other time what you want to hear is what you want to hear from the people are giving you feedback, and then you neglect other parts of the feedback?
Sorry, can you please expand a little bit further so I can understand the question?
For example, Richard is the CEO of X. There's a particular way he wants the data to be brought. Even if people are not performing very well, the people will just tell him, there is a good performance and this and that. You're doing very well. You're a good communicator. Even if when I have something that I want to pass across, but because I know you may not take it, I, what should I say, recalibrate, sweeten the response so that you do not get the real data. You mentioned about data. So I give you data of what you want to hear, not what exactly is happening on the ground. You've had this quote in Kenya, the ground is different. I'll give you what you want to hear, not what the ground is saying.
Well, I think it's important to start. What can you do when you're working with untruths, right? You can address them head on. You can ignore them, which is not beneficial because that person will now have, they will be emboldened to continue with it. And so I think whenever you want to confront someone or have a difficult conversation with someone, that it's important to do it in private. You can also provide the actual data points to them. And also, you know, if it puts you at risk, you need to study that person well. Study the person very well to determine the best way to present the information.
Very good. As we come to the tail end of our discussion, there are organizations that have failed because the powerful people within the organization never receive. I have an example like Kodak, the Kodak moment. I have an example of Nokia. Do you have any other examples of organizations that have fallen because the management did not entertain feedback?
I do. I do. They're more, you know, personal type of experiences that I've had in the past. And so there are a few things that I have done to help leaders of organizations understand the importance of feedback up. You know, I spend a lot of time developing good relationships with CEOs, presidents that I'm working with. And so I always do this particular training so that people can incorporate it into their practices. And at times, the CEOs, presidents will also be on the particular training and use the techniques and implement the techniques. And so if I know that they have attended these trainings, I'll say to them as a HR professional, that, you know, there are some things that people are reluctant to say to you. And in order for the organization to grow, we have to have varying perspectives. And we want people to know that we respect and acknowledge their opinions and their perspectives. And so I've done some encouragement of that when it comes to, you know, the top leaders of an organization. It's not easy to do, but it's something that you can work on by continuing to build the relationship so that you can present that information in a way that is well received.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If people forget, what is it that you do not want them to forget? Your parting shot.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. I think that leadership is definitely something that, yes, there is authority there, but we also want people to understand that it's just a title and that you are an employee as well. And so having humility, receiving feedback, giving feedback is vital for the growth and the evolvement of any organization and the individuals in the organization.
We have got to continuously, ladies and gentlemen, to evolve. We have got to learn from other people. We have got to unlearn the bad behaviors or habits that we have so that we can grow. You remember she has said that feedback, if it has got to serve you, you have got to grow. Always be on the side of growth. My name is Richard J. Magoma, and I can see my good friend Paul Mbata has reminded us that on the 16th of this month, that is this week, I think a day or two from today, we'll have performance management, the pitfalls, by none other than Ann Babu, and it is 3,000 shillings, and you will get 1 CPD points, which is important for your good standing. Also, Paul has given us the link to join so that the discussion can continue. So don't forget to join our WhatsApp group. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for finding time. Shanice, thank you so much. The team that cooks these discussions from Atara Solutions, may God bless you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Janice. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Good night.